Alright, good morning or good afternoon everyone. So in front of you should have a worksheet that says percent of a number, and it should be this big wheel, and each section tells you how to find the percent of a number depending on what the problem or what the question is asking you. So let's start off with this section right here where it says what is 20% of 50? For all intents and purposes, this is probably going to be the question you're going to be asked the most in most of your math problems, but it's also probably the one you're going to be using the most in real life. So we'll start off with this one. So as you can see here, it says part equals percent times or multiply the whole. So what is 20% of 50? Or if you'd like to write it, you can write 20%, okay, of 50. So in order to find a 20% of 50, first thing we need to do is turn the 20% into a decimal, okay? Because you can't just say 20% times 50. We have to turn this percentage into a decimal. So I'm going to draw a little arrow here and write down change to a decimal, which means 20% is going to equal 0 and 20 hundredths, or 0 and 2/10. The way I got that is I took the decimal that's right here at the back of the percentage and moved it 2 times to the left. When you move it 2 times to the left, or move the decimal 2 places to the left, you're left with the decimal, which is 0 and 20 hundredths, or 0 and 2/10. It's said the same way. So it's 0 and 20 hundredths, or 0 and 2/10, times, so what's our whole number? Our whole number is 50, because we're trying to find 20% of 50. So we have 0 and 20 hundredths times 50, okay? When I'm multiplying this, I'm going to multiply it with 50 times 2/10, because it's the same thing, because without the 0, it's still 2/10. So 50 times 2/10, 0 times 2 is 0, 5 times 2 is 10. Then I gotta count the decimal place. Remember, whenever you're multiplying decimals, you just have to count how many places are after the decimal, and I just have one place, so I have to count one place and put the decimal there. And we're left with 10. So 20% of 50 is 10. Okay, I'm gonna draw a little cloud over that. Okay, so that's the easiest way to find it. It's also, so another way to look at it is also looking at it like this. So this is also another way I like to look at percentages, and it's also a good reminder to show you what exactly percentages are over, because I know whenever I ask you for some of you, when I ask what is the percent always out of, and I just hear cricket sounds. So do you know percent? Remember, percent, cent meaning 100, so it's per 100, so it's the percent over 100. So whenever you're trying to look for what is 20% of whatever the number is. So for this case, what is 20% of 50? So it's like saying 20 over 100, because that's our percent. 20% is a number, x, sorry, you didn't see that right away. 20 over 100 equals some number of 50. Okay, so that's what we're trying to find. So there's two ways to look at this. We need to figure out, well, how do we get from 100 to 50 and do the same for the top? Or you can cross multiply, okay? Because 20 times 50, or 100 times x, sorry, I'm running out of room here, equals 20 times 50. Because I'm just cross multiplying. 100x equals 20 times 50 equals 10,000. And then when I divide each side by 100, I'm left with x, or the number is 10. Because 10,000 divided by 100 is 10. The same thing as doing this. Or another way, sometimes when I'm helping some of you on Khan Academy, I ask you, okay, how did we get this denominator to this denominator? If you look at this, 100 to 50, how did we do that? How did we get from 100 to 50? So we either had to multiply or divide. In this case, if we multiply this by 2, we get 100 divided by 2 equals 50. So if I did that for this bottom part, I must do it to the top. So 20 divided by 2 is going to still equal x equals 10. So that's the beauty of math, is that you have several ways to figure out how to get the answer. We don't have to just do it this way. This is the easiest way to do it because you're just taking the percentage, turning it into a decimal, multiplying it by the whole. But if you need to look at it this way, that's okay too, because then you can see what's the percent is always out of 100, and then you can see and then when you times it by the whole, see, and then you can cross multiply and you can see what your number is at the top here. Okay, so let's try another one. What is 35%? Oh, I made a little mark there. 35% of 70. Okay, so I'm going to use this method again because it is the easiest one, but if you need to use this method, that is okay. This is a method that I've used many times before because I sometimes need to visually see why we're doing it this way, because doing it like this is the same as doing it like this. We're just turning it into a decimal form. Okay, so 35% of 70. So if we turn this percentage into a decimal, it's going to be 0 and 35 hundredths times our whole, which is 70. So just remember that. Part equals percent times whole, because we're just trying to remember, for this type of problem, what is 20% of 50 or what is 35% of 70? We're trying to figure out the part. We're trying to see what the part equals, okay? Because part of 70 is 35%. Okay, so 0 and 35 hundredths times 70. So 0 and 35 hundredths times 70. 5 times 0 is 0, 3 times 0, 0 times 0. Add your 0 here. 7 times 5 is 35. Carry to 3. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 3 is 24. Then I have to count how many decimal places are after the decimal. So there's 1, 2 places after the decimal. So I have to count 1, 2 here. So my answer is 24 and 5 tenths. So that is the part of 70 that is 35%. Okay, it's the same thing as saying, hold on, it is the same thing as saying 35 over 100 equals a part over 70, and your part is 24 and 5 tenths. Okay, so now that you're finished with this entire section of the worksheet, before you move on to the next video, you need to do these two problems. What is 30% of 160, and 7% of 75 is what number? So before you move on to the next two videos, you need to do what is 30%. What is 30% of 160, and 7% of 75 is what number? Once you finish those two problems, Miss VG and I will be stamping this section of the paper. The percent equals, or part equals percent times whole. We'll be stamping that part of the paper, and we'll be going around and checking the what is 30% of 160 and 7% of 75 is what number, okay?